We're honored tonight to have as our moderator for the discussion, a very qualified moderator. Dr. Sam Hill serves as a provost for the Woodbridge campus of Northern Virginia Community College, a position he's held since 2005. Dr. Hill has a strong history of community involvement, including serving as a commissioner of the PWC Future 2030 Commission, member of the board of directors for Centera Potomac Hospital, the Prince William Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Manassas Prince William Center for the Arts. Also a member of the Lake Ridge Rotary Club, a 2007 graduate of the Citizen Academy of the FBI Academy at Quantico, and a graduate of the 2006 Prince William County Community Leadership Institute. Dr. Hill is also a member of the Prince William Committee 100, and so we're especially delighted to have him moderate our discussion this evening.
Thank you. And it is indeed a pleasure for me to be able to serve as the moderator for this important event this evening. And I'm pleased to say that this is the second time I've had the opportunity to serve as a moderator. If any of you all know Supervisor Jenkins, whenever Supervisor Jenkins calls, I just do whatever he asks me to do. And the Woodbridge campus of Nova is fortunate to be in his district, and he is a strong supporter of the Woodbridge campus. And he called to see if I would do this, and as I said, when Supervisor Jenkins calls, the answer is yes. You know, I would also like to acknowledge a fellow colleague in the education arena, Ken Bassett, who's in the back of the room, the superintendent with the superintendent's office. And Ken, I'm picking on you for thanking you for coming out yesterday. The chancellor for the Virginia Community College system is doing what he's called his listening tour, and he's going around the Commonwealth and listening to people from the regions that various community colleges serve to get insights on their thoughts of the community college that serves their region, what some of the needs are. And Ken was kind enough to come and participate in that session and gave our chancellor some helpful information. You know, this is a very important topic, and it's all about education. And as we all know, you know, you hear elected officials talk about economic development and uplifting the community, creating jobs, but it all starts with education, and it really all starts with the public schools and making sure that we have students who are graduating with the proper skills to enter the workforce. And the state of Virginia has put in place the SOLs. And I say that carefully because I may make a slip and say SLOs, because SLOs are what is a similar acronym for us in higher education, student learning outcomes. So we have to have those also in higher education. So if I make a mistake and say SLOs, I really mean SOLs. And so the SLOs are standards of learning that have been put in place by the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we'll hear from people on the SOLs, and then also the Common Core is another standard for K through 12 students. And this is a program that's been initiated by the governors of several states and have been adopted by several states. And I will leave it at that. There are experts up here that know a lot more about those two standards, and that's what we're here to learn about this evening. And again, both systems are about setting standards to provide an opportunity for teachers and students to meet high achievement goals. And we'll start off by by having each of the panelists give a presentation, and to the panelists, there's a 12-minute time limit, and we have a timer here. And can you explain how this is going to work?
At the 6-minute mark, you'll see a half gone time. You get a 2-minute warning. You get a 1-minute warning. You have a minute. You have 20 seconds to take a breath and make your final statement. And then when I raise this, Dr. Hill will yank your microphone.
Okay. Panelists, have any of you been in Toastmasters? Okay, we'll start off with the panelists, and to the audience, once the panelists have given their presentation, we'll open the floor up for questions, and the emphasis is on questions. And I really want to encourage everybody to keep it to a question, and this we don't intend for this to be an opportunity to make personal statements. It's really questions and an opportunity to learn more about this topic. And let's start off with Mr. Gil Trinham. Gil began his second term on the school board as a Brentville representative on January 1st, 2012. He and his wife, Michelle, have one son currently attending Prince William School, Walker, who led us in the Pledge of Allegiance, an 8th grade student at Marstella Middle School. Their older two sons attended Brentsville District High School, and Cody is currently a freshman at Virginia Tech University. They live in Prince William County. They have lived in Prince William County since 1996, when he was assigned shore duty at the Pentagon as a nuclear submarine officer. Mr. Trinham graduated with his bachelor's degree and master's degree in mechanical engineering from the Real Texas Tech University. We are fellow alumni, and earned a graduate certificate in systems engineering from George Mason University. He served as an active duty U.S. Navy official for 12 years and continues to serve his country as a Navy Reserve Commander, supporting the Space and Naval Warfare Systems Command. Mr. Trinham is currently a senior systems engineer with Leidos Incorporated and has worked in the field of intelligence, information systems, and security for 17 years. Before serving his first term in 2007, Mr. Trinham served as the Brentsville District Representative to the Prince William County 2006 Citizen Bond Committee. He and his family are members of the Manassas Assembly of God Church in Bristol, where he teaches Sunday school classes to 4-year-olds for several years. Mr. Brenham?
Well, thank you, Dr. Hill. First off, like Dr. Hill said, I'm an engineer, so I didn't bring slides. As an engineer, my slides tend to be black and white text. So, and the last thing you want to do is have a politician sitting up here with slides to talk to for forever. So, the first I'm going to start off. I'm going to read the last paragraph of the official Virginia position on the SOLs and Common Core. And what that says is the Board of Education supported and continues to support the development of internationally benchmarked standards for states to adopt outright or to use as models to improve their own standards. The board, however, opposes the use of federal rulemaking and the peer review process as leverage to compel word-for-word adoption of the Common Core state standards. So that's just so everybody knows what the Virginia State Board of Education official position is. Now, for those of you who know me and know me for a while and the way I operate on the school board, I like to let everybody know where I'm coming from. So my understanding tonight is that the topic of the discussion is, should Virginia keep the SOLs, modify the program, or drop it in favor of Common Core? So from my perspective, we should keep our state standards, reviewing them and updating them as appropriate to maintain rigor and ensure our students are prepared for college or the job market. We should not permit our state representatives and educational leaders to abdicate their responsibility to an unelected and unaccountable third party. So that's so everybody knows where I stand on the issue. Now tonight, we have several other people here that are going to talk, and they're going to probably talk. I know a couple of them are going to really talk about the details of the Common Core and SOLs and the comparison and things like that. So I don't want to duplicate that effort. Plus, as a school board member, I try to take a different perspective than things at times. So when the reason why I come to my position on SOLs versus Common Core is a couple different reasons, and I'm just going to go through those in not any particular order, but just so you know where I'm thinking of and where I come at these. First off, I'm going to talk about practical issues. The SOLs, and remember when we're talking SOLs, we're talking the standards of learning, and we're not talking about the SOL tests necessarily that everybody knows at the end of the school year. Most people, when they think SOLs, they immediately go to the test, and it kind of spins some people up and drives them nuts, and there's a whole other issue and topic of discussion is whether we test too much, which some of us think we do. In fact, the school board, Ms. Jessie, brought forth a resolution a couple board meetings ago that we adopted along those lines. But what I want to think about is from a practical perspective, the SOLs have some secondary and tertiary impacts that we need to think about and remember. And so I sat down and started just pulling a list of things out of the top of my head that I can know, SOLs impact that you normally wouldn't think of. For instance, from the student perspective, graduation requirements. In order to graduate Virginia with a high school diploma, you have to have either 6 verified credits or 9 verified credits to get either a standard or advanced diploma. Well, verified credits are essentially those that are verified at the end by a standardized test, typically the SOLs, the SOL tests. Sometimes they can be used for admission criteria for extended classes in some of our specialty programs. We use them. We try to incentivize students at times that we offer them exemption from their finals if they get a pass advance on their SOL. So we use it. So there's these things. Testing. We use them to drive testing and more testing and testing again. From a school and division-wide perspective, accreditation criteria are based on our SOL performance. At the national level, our annual measurable objectives are based on our SOL performance, and that's to meet the requirements of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or which is the follow-on to No Child Left Behind. So we're not here to debate the validity of some of these things. Right now I'm just going through, these are the things that are affected. Internally, our School of Excellence Awards take them into account. A couple of big things that SOLs drive directly are our curriculum. Our curriculum is pulled from the SOLs. And textbooks. Our SOL alignment is a huge determination and a huge factor in a lot of the issues when we start doing textbook adoption. And that costs a lot of money, tons of money. At the teacher perspective, now student performance is being factored in, state mandated that you've got to account for student performance in our teachers' performance evaluations. Principals and teachers can use the results of the SOL test to go and see if there's certain threads or strands that they need to improve on for their classroom or for their school, things like that. And then another issue with that SOLs indirectly can impact or is regards to the school calendar. If anybody doesn't even think about it, but for those of you who may not be familiar, we have what's commonly called, derisively referred to it as the King's Dominion Law here in Virginia, which basically is the law that says we are not permitted to start school until after Labor Day. And that's driven by the tourism industry. But unless you get a waiver, an exemption, which Prince William County has never gotten an exemption since I've been on the board, and to my knowledge has never gotten one, you can't start before Labor Day. Well, that puts us in a situation where school divisions that do get the waiver, they've got about a week to 2 weeks worth more of instructional time to prepare their students for the SOL exams, or also at the high school level, your AP and IB and Cambridge ACE exams. Also, those start kicking off around in May. So those exams and those exam schedules drive our calendar, or at least affect it, and affect our students' performance when compared to their peers. All of these things have a cost. Wow, I've gone through half my time. That's pretty good. all these things have a cost, and anytime there's substantive changes to any of those things, you've got a ripple effects that has costs coming on, following through. They can cost significant amounts of money, especially like in the case of textbooks. But those changes, if we just adopt the Common Core straight as it is, those changes, we don't control those changes, but we will have to react to them because our students will be compared against those other students. So if other school divisions react to them and change, and all of a sudden that's the standard, then we're going to have to be driven to that. So we're going to have to be responsive to that, and it's going to cost us money. And we already have enough issues to deal with regards to funding and where we spend our money. We've got classroom size issues that we really need to focus on, and so anything that staff compensation issues, making sure our teachers get paid. So anything that pulls money away that we can't control like that makes it harder for us to accomplish our priorities in those areas. Another reason why I have concern is local control and feedback. The Common Core not, specifies content, but in some cases it can also specify methodology. And that methodology may not be appropriate to what the student or the classroom needs. That's really, from my perspective, that's our teachers' job. The teachers are professionals. We treat them like professionals, and we should trust their judgments in those issues. That takes away some of the autonomy of the teachers. The other thing about feedback is no matter how hard the big collective, we try, we never get it right 100% of the time. So it's silly to think that the Common Core initiative is going to get it right the first time either. When we have Virginia state standards, we have at the school board level and the administrative level, we have personal relationships with our elected representatives in Richmond. My delegate, Richard Anderson, I know Richard. I can call him if I have an issue, and I have access to him, and I can have a voice for our school division. Same thing since I live in the western side of Prince William County, whether it be in Brentsville's covered Delegate Marshall. I've known him, worked with him. Jackson Miller, worked with him. Up in Gainesville, Tim Hugo, worked with him on issues. We know all these people. It's not just me, and it's not just along party lines or within the House delegates. On the Senate side, my state senator is Senator Stewart. I know him well enough to know that his wife is a teacher down in the southern portion of the state. I've worked with Senator Barker on issues before, and Senator Colgan from up in Gainesville, his daughter-in-law taught my son when he was in elementary school. So we have those kinds of relationships with our state delegations that at least we can have input and have some and try and represent our school division, our concerns. If it goes to a larger organization in the sky that's under all these other governors' things, we're going to lose that. You'll have to fight the bureaucracy all the way up. Another concern I have is just the implementation. It's still early in the life of Common Core, so they're still working through the implementation issues. And so, what's the push to get all the states on board with Common Core at this point? Well, they're still working through those issues. I realize that some states may need that, and that's fine. If their standards need to be brought up to the level of Common Core because they're behind, I don't have an issue with that. But from a Virginia perspective, we've got some good school divisions, especially here in Northern Virginia, when we've got some great schools. We have, TJ High School is arguably one of the best public high schools in the country year after year after year. We've got some incredible school districts, Fairfax County, Falls Church, McLean, here in Prince William County. And I know sometimes we like to compare ourselves to Fairfax, and sometimes we get somewhat of an inferiority complex to Fairfax. But I tell you what, when you start talking to other places in the other areas farther out in the state, you go to other states, and a lot of people don't have it near as good as we have it in here. So the last thing is, what's the driver? What's the driver for the Common Core? And that goes to this whole discussion of, follow the money. And sometimes you'll see people talk about this as a prelude to a national takeover of the educational system. I'm not going to say whether or not that there's a national takeover, but what I do, at least from my perspective, what I've seen is if you have common standards and you have common tests, which we're working on common tests, then that will drive you to a common curriculum and a common set of textbooks. So it'll all work that way. Whether that's intended goal or not, you'll wind up getting there. And you also want to concern about how much input are some of our vendors having into this process, and are they driving it some? I'm a defense contractor. For those of y'all who aren't familiar with Leidos is, I I used to work for SRIC, still do. We split. Leidos, we jokingly call it Greek for has bad insurance, but it's a new company. But I'm a defense contractor, so I get it. If I can help drive the government with their policy, it helps me as a contractor. I get that. As an elected official, that's not the way it should work. So we have Pearson Incorporated as one example. Pearson does the SOL test for Virginia. They're working big into the testing for the Common Core. Pearson is also the curriculum vendor that brought us math investigations with all that. And just as a side note, Pearson is also the company that developed the software that runs our gradebook software, which didn't work so well this last grading period. So how much influence do we want those to have? So anyway, I've got 20 seconds left to wrap up. So I just want to say, like I said, my position is as a Virginia, we should stick with our own standards. We should certainly benchmark them against not only the Common Core, but every other set of standards that we think is good, and continue to improve ours. But that's all I have for right now. Excellent. Thank you. I'll just leave it on.
Thank you, Mr. Trenum. Our next panelist is Lily Jesse. And Mrs. Jesse is in her first year as a member of the Prince William County School Board. And prior to that, she served 35 years with Prince William County Schools and 20 years as the principal of Vaughan Elementary. Thanks for your service. Mrs. Jesse is a nationally recognized author, mentor, master teacher, innovative administrator in the educational field. During her tenure with Prince William Public Schools, she served as supervisor of the Title I reading program, a diagnostician, a reading teacher, assistant principal, and principal. Mrs. Jesse has received numerous awards for her contributions to the educational community. In 1996, she received the Washington Post Distinguished Educator Leadership Award and was named Prince William County Principal of the Year. She received the Unsung Hero Award from Channel 50, Educator of the Year from the Dale City Christian Church, NAACP Community Service Award. Mrs. Jesse earned her master's degree in communications disorder from Northwestern University and a bachelor's degree in speech pathology from South Carolina State University. She has also co-authored 2 anthologies, The Collaborative Principal and The Collaborative Teacher. And Mrs. Jesse, after 35 years in Prince William County, I think third anthology should be on the way, the changes that have happened in Prince William County, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes. Mrs. Jesse.
I hope my 12 minutes haven't started.
They start when I hand you the mic. I'm holding on to it.
Okay, thank you. Actually, if I had known we were going to have a screen, I would have brought some PowerPoints. But I do have handouts, and those handouts have been handed to you. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to approach this from being a principal. When I got on the school board, there are people in the audience who knows that I never run for anything. I've never run for any president of any organization. I've really never been a person for positions and offices. But I have really always been very, very committed to kids. And that's why I'm on this board. I want to kind of introduce what the Common Core is and what the Common Core is not, because I think that that's important. And believe it or not, I'm going to start with the bus analogy. What do you notice about buses throughout the United States? Are they all the same color? Yeah, they all look the same. In 1939, it was decided that every state had its own bus. They were blue buses, they were trucks, and they had their own safety measures. And so in 1939, we decided that all buses should look the same, but there should be each school would have some autonomy, but there were certain framework kinds of that we should keep in mind. The same is true with the Common Core. The Common Core is not a curriculum. It is a list of standards. And from my point of view as a principal, I was a principal in a very highly transient school. We're in a military situation here where we have lots of military kids coming in. And if there are teachers in this audience, they know exactly what I'm talking about. A child from California, second grade in California looked different from second grade in Virginia. Hawaii, we had different states that we thought had better standards. Second grade looked different. So teachers not only had the problem of having kids coming into their classrooms in the middle of the year, they came into their classrooms at different levels. They may be above, if you're a second grade teacher, they could be above or below. This is what happened. The state's governors got together along with some of the chief officers and along with teachers and said we should have a common set of standards. In other words, if we're going to teach fractions in second grade or third grade or fourth grade, everywhere throughout the United States, we should know that second grade is where this particular concept is taught, so that it would be an easier transition for the students and an easier transition for the students. The other thing that happened was that we began to look at where we were in relationship to the world. We are in a different era. Everything is moving. Our kids are not going to compete with just people in Virginia. They're going to compete with people all over the world. This global economy, you can touch China in a second. And we began to notice that we were at different points. So we were looking at that. The universities were involved because they were looking at whether or not students were entering universities with what's called credit-bearing entry. Many of our students are still entering universities and having to take remediation. I'm sure you're aware of this. So as a parent, you got another year. You go in thinking, I'm ready for college, and you're not. So the universities said to us, we have kids coming in. We really need to look at ways that these students can come to us prepared and actually be able to move on. The business community is involved because the business community is telling us that our students, instead of the big gap, which I've got on some of my slides, the big skills gap is a new thing. We still have the other gap, and there's a flyer there where it outlines that. At 12th grade, the gap, we're moving ahead at the elementary level. But at 12th grade, the gap between low-income kids, minority kids is widening, and that's a problem because these are going to be the people that will enter the workforce. So we have in engineering, we do not have enough students to enter the engineering market because we were given tests where kids were filling in blanks, and people were teaching to the tests. But as we've moved to higher level rigorous standards in the state of Virginia, and as we move to a more Common Core approach, you can't fill in a blank. We're looking for kids who can think. Instead of kids who just ask the right question, who come up with the right answer, we want kids citizens or adults, who can ask the right questions. We want students who are able to think. In your handout, you'll see that you have a packet there on some of the different standards for college entry and where we are and why it's important. So if you just flip through that, why do we want all of our kids to go to college? Because, one, they're going to make more money. So I think that's on slide number 1. I think 2 times as much. They are also, college graduates are more employable. They are voters. They don't get sick as much, so maybe we don't need a health care program because they're not, because people who are lower income become ill more quickly. And then near the end of the slide, you'll see that the big issue is where we are in relationship to the rest of the world. So if you look near the end, you'll see where we are on the international standards, where the United States is. We rank 12th in reading. We rank, I think, 17th in science or 24th in math. And I provided that information for you so you can see. As a nation, we're not competitive. The Common Core is not really about Virginia. The Common Core is about where we rank in relationship to the world and whether or not our kids are going to be able to compete in that particular. The other issue on the Common Core has to do with how much teachers have to teach. This particular person is called Marzano. He does what's called a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is where you look at what really works. And what he's saying to us, that if teachers taught all the standards that are listed in the SOLs and various instruments, they would have to teach until 12 to 24 for 24 curriculum. Instead of K-12, we'd have a K-24. They just can't do it. And so in the Common Core, they have what are called anchor standards. And I have a sheet where you can look at the anchor standards. These are the Common Core anchor standards. If you're a teacher in the room, you'll see that I have put writing standards, reading standards, and I think I may have put math standards. I'm not sure. But when you look at the Common Core pretty much decides that teachers don't have time to teach all these standards. And they need to teach what's called power standards. Power standards are 10 standards. They teach 10 standards, but you're teaching vital standards. In other words, main idea. Every teacher in this room knows whether you're teaching math, science, social studies, kids have to know central idea. And you do what you do with power standards, you say, if I don't teach anything else, as a group, we're going to teach these 10 things. Now, we're going to weave in all the other information, but this is what we're going to teach. So it's going to really help teachers in that respect. The other item on there, you'll find that I have given to you where we are in terms of college graduation for our intergenerational. We're behind. You can see that. I think I provided that for you. And I also provided for you, hold on, this particular little baby. This is the NAEP. We're not just compared to other people in the United States, we're compared to the world. So the NAEP test is a test that's given, and it's given at 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th. Look at the science objective that's being taught. And answer the question, is this a fill-in-the-blank type of an answer? It says, predict the path of the sun, the number of daylight hours to determine the best planting location. So kids have to develop what we call performance-based assessments. They have to do things other than filling in blanks. And once this is done, we know that they can get facts. We know where they can get those facts. So we're looking at developing a curriculum, which the Common Core is not. You develop your own curriculum. You still could keep your the standard kinds of things that from our state standards. You could also keep your School of Excellence. It's not going to change any of that. So when you look at this particular assessment, this question, and I have teachers in the back, is this a fill in the blank? No. Now, the question is, have teachers been trained to do this type of teaching? Some have, and some have not. So by not being in the Common Core, we are out on the opportunity for our teachers to receive the training. There's some money. It's not coming from the federal government for curriculum. It's coming for training. And it's providing us with some information that's very useful for our teachers. I'd like to also talk to you about the whole concept of rigor. When all the surveys are done with students, they always say, I want something more difficult. When I surveyed Lake Ridge, those middle-class parents said, we want rigor. And so if we have rigor that allows our kids to compete on an international level, it will help. Finally, for teachers, if they move to another state, if you're a second grade teacher, you move to California, if second grade in California has the same standards, it's easier for you to make a transition. If your child moves from Virginia to another state, then he or she has an opportunity to make that transition and make it easier. So I'm not here to say whether I'm for the Common Core or not for the Common Core or to beat up the SOLs, because I remember when the SOLs came in and Dr. Kelly said, just teach the curriculum because we were ahead of everybody. We had a curriculum. Same thing with this. We have our SOLs, but eventually, people, we have to compete with the nation. I say that the Common Core, we didn't adopt the Common Core because Virginia, we're just not common. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. It's on. Thank you, Mrs. Jesse. Our next panelist will bring the teacher's perspective is Meg Gruber, and Meg is the president of the Virginia Education Association. Mrs. Gruber serves as an earth science teacher at Forest Park High School here in Prince William County. She became the president of the Virginia Education Association in August of 2012, assuming the highest elected position of this 56,000-member group, the largest and oldest professional organization serving public schools and public educators in the Commonwealth. Before coming to Prince William, she began her teaching career of over 30 years in Delaware. As a longtime association activist, Mrs. Gruber has also served as the president of the Prince William Education Association and as a member of the board of directors of the National Education Association and the VEA. Along the way to those positions, Mrs. Gruber also served as vice president of both organizations, president of the VEA's District 9, a member of the executive committee of the VEA Fund for Children in Public Education, and as an associate delegate to more than 20 conventions for both the VEA and the NEA. She has also been a part of numerous VEA statewide committees over the years, serving on the membership, budget, legislative, resolutions, and executive committees. Mrs. Gruber holds a master's degree from the University of Delaware and a bachelor's degree from Clarion University in Pennsylvania. Ms. Gruber.
Thank you. But I'll come around. It's nice to be home, even if it is just for a few hours. I have taught 32 years in Prince William County and several years in Delaware before that, so it's nice to be back. Currently is serving as president of the VEA, Virginia Education Association. That did take me to Richmond, but I'm certainly come back as often as I can. One of the things that we have to look at from a teacher perspective that you all have to remember, as I have 2 of my 8 bosses sitting right here and another one back there, and up until, the Board of Education as well. From a teacher's perspective, for lack of a better term, we do what we're told. So we teach to the best of our ability, working with all of the students of Prince William County who come through our doors, whatever curriculum and whatever standards are established for us to teach. Saying that, When we look at the SOLs, we need to go back to 1995 and that current political climate. And at the time, the SOLs were instituted to address some real concerns across Virginia. And that's about the lack of consistency we had in curriculum across the state. And concerns that children who were moving from locality to locality within Virginia were not easily able to adjust. And obviously through time, they would go on to college but would have a different type of skill set. And in some ways that ties right into what Mrs. Jessie talked about now with the Common Core. Whether you call it SOLs, whether you call them Common Core, whether you call them Joe's standards, they're just standards. They're minimum things that we believe our children should know and be able to do. As we are approaching things, we have to realize that our 1995 SOLs, and they're periodically tweaked and updated, but they're really not. I can say from my perspective as a high school or science teacher, the evolution, so to speak, that I've seen of the earth science SOLs in Virginia is to add more and more standards and take nothing away, but still give me the same amount of time and the same test I have to prepare my children for, which in essence broadens our curriculum, but it becomes very shallow when it comes to true understanding and true depth of knowledge and any type of skill development. Now, the difference between the SOLs as we have today and the Common Core can really, for me, be simplified back into, do you want children to be able to bubble in a test and be able to recite facts, or do you want them to do more than that? Because right now our SOLs, whether, with all due respect to Mr. Trenum, I know we're not going to get into testing, but when push comes to shove, we know that the testing drives everything and being able to get to that test. But right now our SOL tests are basically testing factual knowledge. Now the test has become more difficult, the questions have been worded more difficult, but it's still, can you pick the right answer? I had an experience just this year speaking to a group of what's called the Richmond First Club at their luncheon in Richmond. And there was a professor there from VCU who brought some of her college students. And when I got done speaking and the program broke up, some of the students came up to me and said, I just want you to know that, for my whole career, I was under the SOLs, and I'm really good at taking multiple choice questions. But I'm really struggling in college. Now I'm getting it. I'm working hard and I'm getting help and I'm getting it. But the skills that I'm supposed to have, I don't have because I had to be constantly prepped for a multiple choice test. Now, whether we go to the Common Core or not, I don't care. But the one thing the Common Core does deal more with than our own SOLs is skill-based and thinking-based and analysis. So I can't say whether the Common Core is better. I can tell you right now, if you're hearing enough in the news, that the Common Core has major implementation problems. But that's obviously true of anything. It was true when we put in the SOLs. We have right now this rush to test. Imagine being a ninth grader and just finally getting your system switched over to the Common Core, and you're taking a Common Core test that assumes that you've had the Common Core all the way since kindergarten. It's not a good implementation. But I would like to see definitely our SOLs overhauled away from simply regurgitation of facts. In a lot of cases, from my experience, you're so busy trying to cram in a curriculum that is so broad that you get to the point where there is no time for depth. There is no time to do something different. God forbid you have snow days. Because depending on where they fall and what you're doing, you're like, yeah, I need the day off because that used to be time to catch up on my paper grading. But it's like, oh my God, I'm missed that many days of instruction trying to get ready for the test. So as long as we're going to have tests driving our instruction, we're going to have problems with our students' education, no matter what standards you establish. I mean, if you think back to your own education and think back to your fondest memories in school, I bet it wasn't about taking a test. It was about a teacher that you cared about you. It was a coach that helped you. It was a topic that really, really interested you, and you had time to spend on that topic. We don't do that anymore. Our students are data generators. Our teachers are data analysts. That's not what I got into teaching for, and I'm sure every one of my colleagues sitting back there did not get into teaching to generate tests and test data. It's not that we're against tests, but they have to be used appropriately and not as sticks and punishment. The point is, I really think that we need excellent standards. We need to decide, what does every child in the United States need to know to be a successful and productive adult? And that's not only now within the United States, but it's also, as Mrs. Jessie said, within the world. We're not at that point right now. In my personal opinion, we're too busy playing politics about, is this constitutional? Are we abdicating states' rights? I'd say to anybody on either side of that argument, when are you going to care about our students and our children and what they know and what they're able to do? And let's not get into if I had a magic wand, the politics would come right out of education. Absolutely. Because we have there's some sayings going around that talk about, those that can do, those that can do better teach, and those that can't do either write legislation or propose reform. I'm sorry. I love all my, my elected officials that I have to work with now during the General Assembly and outside of the General Assembly. But when are we going to start listening to those who do the job, who actually do it every day, and who are educated and trained to do it every day? So my focus has always been, and our association's focus has always been, we have to do what's best for our children. And therefore, we're going to continue to strive as educators to try to get our officials, whether they're the appointed Board of Education in Richmond, whether they're our legislators or senators, to start focusing on what's best for children, not what's best for testing companies, textbook publishers, and anybody, whichever side of the aisle you're on, your political party. It's time we focus on what's good for our children. With that, I don't know where my time is, but I'm done.
Thank you, Mrs. Gruber. And thank you for giving us back some time. Our next panelist, and you can tell what's important to a person by how they start their introduction. Mrs. Kim Simon is a mother, a mom, blogger, an education advocate in Prince William County. She is the founder and editor of the Prince William County Education Reform blog and mother of 2 children currently attending Prince William County Public Schools. The Prince William County Education Reform blog was created in 2009 by parents and educators who believed that improving our public schools will require the concerted, combined efforts of parents and teachers to lead open and honest discussions about challenges facing our public schools. Mrs. Simon serves on the Brentsville-Gainesville District Budget Committee, is active with Rudy Youth Club at Cedar Point Elementary, served on the advisory council of her local elementary school, and is a member of the American Math Forum and the United States Coalition for World-Class Math. Mrs. Simons is a certified public accountant and spent her first 13 years of her career as a consultant implementing Oracle financials and re-engineering business practices for public and private clients throughout the world. Mrs. Simons?
Well, I try to get this technology working. Can we just, since this is a forum on education, can I ask that all of our teachers in the room stand up and be recognized so that we can thank you for your service to our children? Have any of you ever been to England? Do you know what ley lines are? They're lines of spiritual activity in England, and basically along these lines of spiritual activity, technology stops working. I decided a bunch of years ago that I am a ley line in and of itself. Told you.
Almost.
Oops.
I just got up.
How do I move it?
Page up. Hang on.
Where's page up? Sorry.
Is that good?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Good for something.
You are very good. I've never used one of these things before, so I apologize if I'm really, really loud. This is a rather baited question to put up at the front. Before we consider changing anything in our public schools, we really need to think about what it is we're trying to fix. Are our public schools failing? The data indicate that they are not, contrary to what many of us have heard. Data from the TIMSS, NAEP, SAT, and ACT exams indicate that children in Virginia's public schools perform on the high side of average when compared with both the nation and the world. And we've been that way for some time. Studies out of Virginia increasingly show that our children are going to college and completing four-year degree programs successfully. That doesn't sound like a failing school system to me. However, there is room for improvement. There is always room for improvement. Long-term trends indicate that increases in 4th and 8th grade performance aren't sustained into high school. The achievement gap between economically disadvantaged and not economically disadvantaged children hasn't budged in Virginia in over 20 years, despite tremendous efforts. Studies indicate that many of our children are interested in STEM fields but can't do the coursework necessary to obtain those degrees. Virginia college professors increasingly lament that the children they get from public schools are incapable of completing college-level coursework and are unwilling to put in the work necessary to succeed. At the K-8 level, as Mrs. Gruber mentioned, end-of-year testing means the entire academic year is focused on those tests. So if a child is ready to move ahead in December, he or she twiddles their thumbs until the end of the year. And if a child isn't ready in May, oh well, they take the test, they probably fail, and then they get promoted anyways, and they're even further behind. Our public schools may not be failing at a systemic level, but they are leaving a lot of kids behind. Are the Common Core the answer we need? Should we continue to maintain local control over what our children learn, when they learn it, and how their performance is evaluated, or should we cede that to the U.S. Department of Education and replace the SOLs with the Common Core state standards? Before we go into that, it's probably a good idea to talk about what the Common Core are. We've heard that a little bit. They are two things, standards and assessments. The standards exist for math and for language arts. That is all they've been written for. The assessments are being developed by two national consortia, Smarter Balanced and PARC, P-A-R-R-C. They're in the pilot stage. The assessments are in the pilot stage right now and will not be available until the spring of 2015 exams. Notice something similar about them? Standards and assessments. What else is standards and assessments? The Virginia Standards of Learning. The Common Core state standards and the standards of learning are exactly the same thing, one on a national scale and one on a state scale. Even more important is what the Common Core aren't. They are not instructional materials and practices, as both Mrs. Gruber and Mrs. Jesse mentioned. They do not call for changes in how we teach math or language arts. The standards themselves explicitly state that they are not instructional materials or practices. It's actually on page 5 if you want to look. Critical thinking and collaborative learning don't appear anywhere in the standards. You can search for them, you'll never find them. There is nothing in the Common Core that calls for teachers as facilitators or student-driven, student-led classrooms. The Common Core don't say that conceptual understanding trumps fluency and accuracy. Even under the Common Core, 3 times 4 still equals 12. It doesn't equal 15, and it doesn't matter how good your process is. Those aren't my words, believe it or not. They're the words of a gentleman by the name of William McCallum. He helped write the standards. Now, there's a lot of confusion about the Common Core that's tied up in the No Child Left Behind waiver. No Child Left Behind is current education law. It has not been repealed, it has not been amended, and everybody hates it. Because everybody hates it, the U.S. Department of Education has decided to give states waivers against the accountability requirements. But like every federal agency, they've said, we've got to have our hooks. Those hooks have 3 parts. 1, what was that? College and career-ready standards and assessments. They have to tie teacher and principal evaluations to student performance, and you have to gather lots and lots and lots of data. These are all things because of the NCLB waiver. They are not the Common Core, and they are not the SOLs. Now, there's a rising tide of concern about the data that's being gathered because some of it appears to be unrelated to K through 12 coursework. My son took the NAEP last year, NAEP exam last year. One of the questions asked him how many hours of video games he played. Right now, FERPA laws prohibit states and localities from sharing individually identifiable information outside of the state or locality. But the U.S. Department of Education has asked that to be changed so that individually identifiable information can be shared with any federal agency or as yet unidentified third party. If the Common Core are basically the SOLs on a national scale with the U.S. Department of Education at the controls as opposed to the Virginia Department of Education, how exactly do they differ from the standards of learning? Let's start with the English language arts standards. Within this room, if you were going to write language arts standards that applied to every single solitary student in public school in the country, how many high school English teachers would you have on that panel? How many college English professors would you have on that panel? A lot. Do you know how many were on it? 0. Not a single high school English professor or high school English teacher or college English professor was on the panel that wrote those language arts standards. That's kind of frightening. Dr. Sandra Strotsky is actually a college English professor. She served on the validation committee. She refused to sign off on the standards. She is not a fan of them. Of the language arts, of the Common Core's language arts standards, she said they represent empty skill sets that weaken the basis of literary and cultural knowledge needed for authentic college coursework. Now with math, we've kind of got a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing going on. Virginia's K-8 math standards, are poor at best. The Common Core's math standards are pretty okay for K-8. They're still below the expectations set for children in high-performing nations, but they're better than Virginia's. Virginia's high school math standards, by contrast, are strong. The Common Core's high school math standards are poor. The biggest difference is college readiness. The Common Core standards cap out at Algebra 2. Virginia supports multiple pathways, including school to work, STEM degrees, or a degree in liberal arts. Here's the catch. Virginia's STEM pathway is predicated on AP Calculus. The person who considers himself the architect of the Common Core is now the head of the College Board. The College Board brought us the AP. They're not going to be supporting calculus anymore because they're realigning the College Board. That means Virginia's STEM pathway no longer exists. So what do? We're at a crossroads. The Common Core in their present form, at least in my opinion, won't fix anything. 6 in one, half dozen in the other. Common Core, SOL, they're the same thing. They won't end poverty. They won't end one-size-fits-all instruction and promotion, won't eliminate end-of-year high-stakes testing, or stop interim testing, or non-stop interim testing. Alone, they're just same old, same old. But the SOLs aren't perfect either. And if the College Board dumps calculus to align with the Common Core, then Virginia's pathway to STEM careers ceases to exist. Is there a way that we can fix our SOLs, strengthen our standards, reform how we teach? Can we do it all? Okay, I'm a mom. Sure, yeah, absolutely. For me, it starts with there are three things we have to do. The first one is strengthen our, yeah, that's really legible, isn't it? Strengthen Virginia's standards. First and foremost, keep our K through 12 language arts standards because they are much better than the Common Cores. Keep our secondary math standards because they're better than the Common Cores. Dump our K through 6 math standards because they're much worse than the Common Cores. Then get a committee together of K through 12 teachers and college professors of math, English, and engineering from Virginia schools and ask them to make sure that all of that stuff that we just put together actually does what we want it to do. Make sure that we have multiple pathways so that if kids want to go straight to work after graduation, there's a pathway for them to graduate because those kids really don't need Algebra 2. Make sure that we've got a pathway for the kids who want to get liberal arts degrees because they probably really don't want calculus. And make sure that we can support kids going for STEM degrees because they really need calculus. Next, change how we teach. Move children ahead. Let me put it this way. Centralized lesson pacing means teachers can't teach lessons in the order they want. They don't have the time to review units when their students don't get it, and don't have the materials, training, or authority to accelerate instruction when their students are ready to move ahead. We need to eliminate centralized lesson planning, pacing, and testing, and let our teachers teach. Once-a-year high-stakes testing means we teach exclusively to the test and move children ahead when the schedule dictates, not when they're ready. We need to eliminate once-a-year high-stakes tests. We need tests that can be administered multiple times throughout the year so that students get the help they need when they need it and can move ahead when they're ready. Our teachers have little control over the students they get in their classrooms, the materials and methods they have to use to teach with, and the pace that they have to follow, yet we blame them when they fail. We need to stop doing that, and we need to figure out a way to evaluate our teachers that's fair. One last thing, I'd really love to see us put together a school-to-work academies that would function like our regional governor's schools, except for kids who are focused on career instead of focused on college. We need to be careful with the data that we get. Information about our children should not be shared outside of the local school division or state. Information that's shared with federal government or third-party researchers should be limited to aggregate data. There is absolutely no reason for them to share individually identifiable information with anybody outside of our local school district. Information about our children should not be used to make determinations about what they can and cannot do. In my opinion, neither the Common Core nor the SOL meet our children's needs. They don't. If it's a choice between doing one or the other, I'd stick with the SOLs. We've already got a waiver from NCLB, and the race to the top money has been spent. If we want real reform, I think we should consider some sort of a Common Core Plus plan, like I've just laid out. If the state won't do it, then you guys can. School districts across the nation are adopting, you're welcome. School districts across the nation are adopting Common Core Plus programs in their districts because they've recognized that the Common Core are simply inadequate to meet their children's needs. Either way, we'd get the benefit of stronger standards, multiple pathways to graduation, all while protecting student privacy and maintaining the limited amount of local control over public education in our state. Thank you very much. I broke it again. I don't know how to do this.
Thank you, Mrs. Simons. And thanks to all of our panelists, and thank you for making my job easy by staying within the time limit. Now we're to the part where there's audience participation, but before we do that, you probably don't have many questions because they did such a good job of presenting both. No. We And if you would, when you have your questions, if you would wait till the mic comes to you so we can get the question on tape. And again, I want to ask, this is the question and answer section, not the statement session. And we are now open for questions.
And please give your name and your magisterial district or city.
Hi, my name is Carol Proven, and I'm from the Gainesville district. And Mr. Trenum, this is addressed to you. You were talking. You all did a great performance. Thank you so much. But you were talking about the right to, not the right to work, the King's Dominion law, and why hasn't Prince William, or have they, sought a waiver for this? Because there are many other counties, as you said, that have.
Thank you. We have sought the waiver. Well, I say we've sought the waiver. We tried. Basically, we don't meet the criteria. If I recall correctly, the criteria is you have to have missed a certain number, and I don't remember the numbers, but basically it's based on the number of days that you missed due to weather, inclement weather, and which is really boils down to how many snow days you wind up taking in the year. And if you take more than some level for every 3 out of the last 5 years, then you qualify for the waiver. Like I said, I forget exactly what that level is, but we have never, I think it's, I'm told it's 10. I always listen to my wife. She's always right. So basically, if we miss over that many school days in 3 or 5 years, then I think it's 3 or 5, then you qualify for the waiver. We have never qualified for that waiver. The only school division that I am aware of that has gotten the waiver that didn't meet your criteria was the city of Roanoke, which because every jurisdiction encircling them qualified for the waiver. Loudon got it a few years back. Last year they did not have it. That's a statutory requirement. This past year we thought we had the juice to get it through the state legislature, and Governor McDonnell had said he would sign off on repealing it, but it didn't make it to the Senate. So, hope that answered your question.
Jane Byer, Potomac District. I was wondering, it wasn't discussed how many other states in the Union have done it. I think it's 45. But what penalty do we have if we don't do it?
None. There is no penalty. No one's being required to embrace the Common Core. 45 states have, and I think, is it 4 territories? 4 territories, 45 states. Minnesota, I think, has decided to not embrace the language arts piece of it. There is a consortium for assessment. Whether you use Pearson or if you decide not to use Pearson is up to you. The federal government is not trying to move Pearson that I know of. Perhaps someone else knows something different. But it's really up to you whether or not you want to. How you teach the Common Core is also up to you. They do recommend the 10 anchor standards because they really feel that teachers have too many standards to teach. And if you look on the one sheet I've given you with the Common Core standards, and you look at the state of Virginia, for every one Common Core, there's like 3 Virginia SOLs. So it's like 17 standards in Common Core, and 17 in state of Virginia, and 10, because they've tried to make it a little bit more global and make it easier for teachers.
as a follow-up, it seems strange to me that 45 states have signed up, and there's no money advantage, there's no advantage. Why have all of them signed up?
I don't know. Okay. Oh, yeah, it is on. Yeah, if you were applying for within Race to the Top and whatever to get that money, you had to adopt the Common Core. So there was a money motivator from Washington to adopt Common Core.
Race to the Top is gone. The money's gone. It's already been spent. But initially, the Race to the Top was based on a tiered hierarchy, and you received points. Some of those points could be received if you had adopted standards and assessments that were shared and in common with multiple other states, and the only standards and assessments that existed at that time were the Common Core. The assessments don't exist yet. They're still being developed by Smarter Balanced and Park. Those are the two consortia in the nation. They're currently in the pilot stage. I think New York State has used them, and if you Google New York State and Common Core testing, you'll hear a whole bunch of stuff about the results of that. They won't be available nationwide until the spring of 2015.
One other thing, following up your question, Jane, as far as the number of states, right now the numbers are correct. Indiana has actually put their implementation of the Common Core on pause, and there are several other states that are considering legislation to maybe put things on pause and just slow the train down a little bit.
Is it fair to say?
We don't need that thing at all. Why don't we just...
Oh, I could talk.
No, it won't be on the tape. Excuse me. She's doing it in front of the speaker.
Okay. This is why I don't like to be on television. So is it fair to say if 45 states have adopted this, Virginia might not have a choice. Even if we don't officially adopt it, we're going to be limited by the materials and textbooks that are offered. And as far as I know, there's only so many textbook companies anyway, and they usually look to the bigger states to see what they're doing. Is that kind of a fair to say, a prediction?
What's limited is that what's going to be limited is that if a state has standards and you're moving from one state to another, and second grade has this list of standards, and your standards are not in line with these standards, then there's going to be difficulty with the transition. I really want to go back to something I said earlier to people in the audience, because I'm not here to fight for Common Core or to fight for SOLs. I'm here to fight for kids. I've been a principal, and I've seen what happens when those kids come into that classroom and those teachers are jumping around. We had kids coming all year, and they would come in at different levels. So if you think class size is a problem, try class size plus kids coming and going and having different levels. So it's not really about the aspect of are we going to be forced. No one's going to be forced to do it. I think the state just has to decide whether or not it's in the best interest. The companies, the major companies, it wasn't just teachers and it wasn't just college professors, but there were engineering firms who are saying there are engineering firms right now who cannot find kids in the United States to fill positions because of, we're talking about the fill-in-the-blank kinds of questions that people get. And we have in some of our tests. So at any whatever, I think what you said, whether you do Common Core or not, when you look at a broad standard, there are certain things that kids have to be able to do. You know, we're just, the country has changed. My husband works for Lockheed. At the table prior to coming up, we were having a discussion about the number of engineers that we have in this country and what's happening. When you look at the new state standards, we have different levels of performance expected for different kids. Asian kids are at a higher level of standards because they score higher on those tests. And these other countries are moving ahead. So it's not just about the state of Virginia. But again, I'm not here to beat up on the SOLs, and I'm not here to beat up on the core Common Core. I just put the facts out, and I think you have to decide what you want to do about it, but no one's being forced.
I think your point with the textbooks is probably fairly well taken, although I will also say that even before we look at Common Core standards and whatever, you've always had problems with textbooks because primarily the state of Texas and California, since they are the largest and have the most kids, they've always driven the textbook market. So whether you're looking at Common Core and, you know, from my aspect as a high school science teacher, I don't care whether we're SOLs or Common Core when it comes from textbook, the textbook's going to have the basic material in it. The key is the curriculum that we develop to teach our children and to teach those standards. I'm personally, I guess I can admit it now because I'm on leave of absence, but I hardly ever used a textbook because I just didn't think that was the best way to go.
Well, and one other way it will impact Virginia is with the AP. With the College Board dumping calculus, that is going to significantly impact our children. I was talking to Mr. Trenum about that, and he said we could always adopt the Ivy or Cambridge calculus standards, but right now that would take separate action by the Department of Education to do that, and then we'd have standards that were not in alignment with the Common Core. The Common Core basically says kids in high school aren't ready for anything above Algebra 2, period, end of conversation. When they first wrote the standards, they were actually capped out at Algebra 1, and they were laughed at so hard by people in the math community that they then changed it to Algebra 2, and it is a watered-down version of Algebra 2 at that.
Does the calculus, with the state board, that means you can't take AP calculus? It's
The
not
only
going to be
calculus
offered?
we offer in Virginia is AP calculus.
And it won't be offered anymore?
They're not going to support it anymore.
That's strange. The other question I have is, does anyone think that if we did adopt the Common Core, we would lose some of the curriculum that we really value in Virginia, or that any state really values that they offer? Or is it just, again, the standards that can be applied to different curriculum and different material? And
Yeah,
lessons?
again, the Common Core is just a set of standards.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the curriculum. This individual, school, at least in Virginia, the individual, Prince William County develops a curriculum that I taught, okay, which was based on the standards of the SOLs. But the SOLs even aren't curriculum.
May I read one of the standards? Please. Yes.
I can think this one.
I don't want it to go.
I have a writing one in my hand now, and I think there's some math ones out there. Write an argument to support claims in an analysis of substantive topics or texts using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. What you're going to find with the Common Core, from my perspective as being a principal, is that there's going to be less textbook-driven types of activities. You're going to have kids really making things, developing things. It's going to be more performance-based. And the textbook companies, some of them are really going to be out of business, because in some of the states now, some of the school system, they're moving more towards digital textbooks. Why? Because things are changing every day. You adopt a textbook, and Betty, how many years we keep a textbook? 5 years. Do you know? 7 to 7. But do you know how many things change in 7 years? That's why they're moving more towards digital, because they add new information as the world is changing. Things are just rapidly changing, and we just need to make sure we're changing with it for our kids.
Stacy, just to talk to one question that, and Ms. Jessie's right, the digital technology is helping things. The new technologies actually make it easier for smaller companies to actually come in and compete and go after those that business, especially if you've got a state like Virginia that's got its own standards. One thing I think that we got to keep in mind is, and Meg mentioned this earlier, is that the SOLs and the Common Core, whatever it is, those are all the minimums. And one of the things that regardless of what standards we have, as long as our approach is in the way we test them, we are evaluating our performance at a classroom level, at a student level to a certain extent, but more so at a classroom level, at a division level, is how many kids we get up to those standards. I've been in the Navy for like 24 years now, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard the statement that, if it wasn't good enough, it wouldn't be a standard. But that's not the attitude that we really need to take, because the way we assess things and the way our focus is on pass rates is there's more of an incentive to drive our students to get the maximum number of students at that minimum standard, as opposed to focusing and trying to empower and allow each student to achieve to the utmost of their ability. And that's part of the approach that we take. So regardless of what standard we have, we're gonna have to be fighting that issue and get beyond that before we see some of the things change that we want to see.
I'm Carol Noggle from the Gainesville district, and we've talked about trying to get teacher input on what to teach. And I just wondered about where are we in the teacher preparation in this in our universities? What are the expectations of the teachers coming out of that? What are they prepared to teach in Virginia?
That's actually, that was something that I had wanted to touch on a little bit, but I ran out of time, and I lost my slide. Again, technology and me, we don't get along. One of the things that I've always had a concern with is that at the elementary level, our teachers are generalists. We expect our elementary teachers to be experts in social studies, history, science, math, reading, writing, everything on preventing bullying, dealing with the fact that my fifth grader just got dumped by his girlfriend, and I didn't even know that fifth graders had girlfriends. We expect our teachers to be experts on all of that at the elementary level. It's ridiculous. We expect them to be superstars, and they can't be. I can remember during the math debates and the math discussions when we had math investigations here, having teachers that I loved and thought were spectacular say, I never really got long division. And these are people who are teaching our elementary kids math. Or having teachers say, science is yucky, you get dirty, and ew, worms. And these were people who were teaching our kids science. And I remember at the time thinking, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to teach stuff you thought was yucky? I don't know how to change that. That would require a fundamental change at the way that our schools of education are run. And right now, there's not a desire to make that change. But I would love to see a world where we could have elementary school teachers who are specialists in one subject or a couple of subjects, and that's what they teach. So if you have a passion for language arts, for reading and writing, then you can teach that to elementary kids, and that passion will convey to those kids. And if you think science is yucky and worms are really gross, then you don't have to teach science to our kids, because worms are gross and yucky. Sorry, I like schist, but I don't like worms.
I'm sorry, but I really just have to say something here. The research doesn't support that whole concept of teachers at elementary departmentalizing. I can't sit here and, someone said I brought the books. I brought the books because our teachers are professionals. Then, I think, and parent input, I love parent input, but we're professionals. And these teachers at elementary, some of them I'm a language arts person. When a teacher said, would you like to teach a class? I would say, yes, if it's language arts, because I'm pretty good at that. I'm not great at the other things, but those teachers get together. They integrate instruction. When you're teaching reading at the elementary level, you've got to teach reading during science. You've got to teach reading during math. You've got to merge and integrate that. And I think that when we say, do teachers know what to do? Yes. How do you think you got those great Virginia scores? You got those great Virginia scores from these elementary teachers. And yes, they do all kinds of things. Like, I need to go to the bathroom now at kindergarten, and you're trying to teach language arts. But they're not babies, but they're elementary kids, and they pull the world together. And when they get to middle, they start moving into language arts. Then you separate language arts from science. You separate the way the cores are working. They do more integration of instruction. And I'm not here to just totally disagree, but as a professional, and I know the research and I know what works, I've got to stand up and say, I think we can't just come in and decide we want to change everything teachers are doing. And yeah, sometimes they say it's yucky, but they still teach it. And they teach it quite well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Clancy McQuigg from Occoquan District. I got a question for all you geniuses up there. Why can't we let, and I'll just give an example, the 8th grade teachers get together and decide amongst themselves who's going to teach what, so that the ones who are really interested in teaching subject X would get the students who are taking subject X, and the ones that are really interested in subject Y could teach subject Y, rather than having the principal decide these 99 kids belong to you and these 33 belong to you. To let the teachers decide amongst themselves who's going to teach what, and teach what really fires their boat at the same and fires their students' boat because of being with a fiery teacher.
I think at the high school and middle school level, they have to be certified. So if you're teaching math, you have to be certified to teach middle school math. Is that correct? Or middle school language arts. At the elementary level, it's a elementary ed certification. So it's a different certification.
The teachers do that. The principal doesn't say you can't. The teachers get together, and what happens when they come into the room and they sit down and we talk about language arts, social studies, math, there's always a math lead. There's always a science lead because that's her love. And, for example, if we're not doing well in science and we've got this great science teacher there, they will, I call it tall graph, short graph people. Tall graph people are 90% in science. So one teacher said, my kids didn't get it. If you're truly collaborative, which is where we should be at all levels, teacher A over here will say, I'll take those kids and teach this. Some people are really good at teaching fractions. So at elementary, they really do integrate. I don't know any teacher worth her salt, and Betty will tell you this, she's in the audience, she's been a principal. We don't get in there and say, you cannot teach language arts if someone misses a skill or something of that nature. We do a lot of sharing at the elementary level. So I think that what you're saying is really very, very much correct, but I just want to let you guys know that it is being done. And we're not the geniuses. I just have geniuses who used to work with me.
Well, and I'll just make one final comment on that topic. In the highest performing countries, in Singapore, Japan, Korea, Russia, the people who kick our butts in math, nationally and in Virginia, and they kick our butts by a large margin in math, the children at the elementary level are taught by mathematicians. They are not taught math by elementary ed teachers or people who are generalists. They are taught by people who understood long division, who get factoring polynomials and understand why you would want to factor a polynomial and can actually spell it. Which I can't, I had to Google it. So there are differences, and it's just my opinion that at the elementary level, so much of what we do at the high school level and so much of what we see in success at the upper levels depends on the foundational skills that our kids get, whether they're ready to do calculus, whether they're ready to do Algebra 1 or Algebra 2. And that means that you have to understand fractions. And if you don't understand fractions, you may be able to talk about fractions until you're blue in the face, but if you can't add them, simplify them, multiply and divide them quickly and efficiently without a calculator, you're not going to do well.
Let me add on to this discussion. Just the realities of budget comes into play as well. Not so much at the middle school level, but especially at the high school level. We have teachers that have great interest and great skills and really would like to teach a specialty class or something that they are just really fired up about. But we've tightened the budgets down so tight, especially at the schools levels, that unless they've got enough students that are willing to sign up and take that class, the principal just can't afford to offer it. So at that point, as much as the teacher might want to take it, we can't afford to. The principal can't afford to offer it. So that teacher's got to go cover something else that is a requirement that either it's a requirement that the students take or where we do have enough student demand to take. So the realities of budget come into play always in these kinds of discussions.
Hi, my name is Charles Ronco. I'm a high school math teacher. Thank you. I'm a little concerned about the untenable situation that myself, my colleagues, and my students are in. Just as a quick anecdote, within the last 2 weeks, I've given 5 tests to a single class in order to collect data that I've never seen the results of. And in the next 2 weeks, myself and all of my other colleagues in my department are going to be pulled out of our classes so that we can help remediate seniors planning to graduate to get their accredited math class under control. They'll pass their SOL for the 5th time. So we're pulling kids out of classes, we're pulling teachers out of classes, all to pass these tests. We're collecting data over and over and over again. And I'm just wondering, I'm looking at this panel and I'm looking at this discussion and I'm looking at 3 options. Keep things the way they are, totally revamp the SOLs, or adopt the Common Core standards. And my question to the panel is, which of those 3 options would change the situation that we're in? Thank you.
I say totally revamp the whole thing, toss it all out, and start over again from scratch. Starting by getting rid of these stupid exams and this nonstop testing. My kids last year in a 4-day week had 7 tests between them. This week they have 6. I have one who's taking a test on material that they just got today, and he was having a heart attack on top of the fact that he got dumped by his girlfriend today about the fact that he couldn't remember where Bismarck was or what Bismarck was important about. And I really could care less about Bismarck. Yeah.
I will say one thing I ask every budget season now, since I've been on the school board, which has been 6 years now, I always ask the question, what are we doing that we don't need to do? And I'll be honest, I never get an answer to that question. I've asked teachers personally, what are we asking you to do at a teacher level that is wasting your time or that you don't have to talk to? And I really have yet to get someone to really give me an answer that says, you know what, this is something that we're being asked to do by our school division, and it's really not helping our students. It's just not the best thing that I can be doing with my time, and who's willing to really go talk to me and go on the record on that. So I would love to have that conversation. I would be happy to have it with you.
I think there's a few in the back row that might help you out with that, Mr. Trenum. I want to just add to, same thing. I think we need to, kind of what I was focusing on, we need to get back to focusing on what's good for kids instead of what's good for testing. And, having a statewide perspective, I can talk about a school system where they require their elementary teachers the 2 weeks prior to the end of the quarter, they are not allowed to teach anything new. It's total remediation to get ready for the school system's benchmark test. That's 6 weeks of instruction that is lost, prepping for a countywide test to get them ready to take the state test. It's bad enough that in Virginia, from grades 3 through senior in high school, there are a minimum of 34 SOL tests that have to be taken. So just imagine all the prep time and everything else, specific different school systems, whether it's Prince William or some other school systems in our state that have gone really, really overboard with prepping for tests. How much instructional time is lost on the guise of having data? And whatever and the data that we're collecting to judge students on, to judge teacher evaluation on, to judge schools on, those tests were never written, and they're not valid for what we're asking them to do. They're not supposed to be used for student growth. They're not supposed to be used to simply evaluate a school on a test score. It's not right. And again, I go back to what I said, we need to get politics out of education.
As a principal, I've done good testing and bad testing. if you went to a doctor and he gave you an x-ray, then he collected that x-ray and sent it to the administrator of the hospital, but didn't use the x-ray, you would decide, why bother with the x-ray? Unfortunately, what's happening should not be happening. My teachers asked once, when a consultant came in, they said, when are we given too many tests? And he said the following, which I've written in my anthology and the other anthologies. One test is too much if it doesn't guide instruction. Every single test you give should be diagnostic in its purpose. If you are testing to send the principal the test, he collects the test, then he sends the collection of tests to central office. Central office, raise your hand. You're back there. But that's the... I know, but someone gets them. But there are what I call data collectors. And teachers have a right to be very upset with that, because what should be happening, teachers should be developing tests that validate their instruction. Teachers should get together and say, standard, this one on arguments, this broad standard, what will the successful learning of this objective look like? How will we as a group decide to assess it so that we know we need to move on? The children, the students know this. So what you're doing, instead of teaching, we're really looking more at learning. And if you are collecting tests and you're just collecting them, something is wrong with what you're doing at, I don't want to say at that school, because I know a lot of principals are not doing that, but some of them really are collecting tests, and it's not just Prince William, it's everywhere. So that's why they're moving more towards what's called power standards or anchors, where teachers get together and they decide, these are the 10 things we're going to teach. If we don't teach anything else, we're going to teach these 10 things. We are going to design our own assessment, and we're going to decide, some groups are faster teachers than others, and we will decide when we're going to give the test. Then you know what you've taught has been taught, and then you move on. So I think we just need to really look at what's happening in individual schools and why so many tests are being given for test's sake. It really should not happen. And if that's happening to you, I apologize, but it should not be happening.
Well, and just my personal opinion, one of the other things that I would love to see us dump is this centralized lesson pacing. It's the centralized lesson pacing means if you're learning multi-digit multiplication in 4th grade, which based on the pacing guide last year started in the beginning of December, you start off with multi-digit multiplication in the 4th grade, and then you get partway through it to where you're doing a 3-digit number by a 2-digit number that ends in 0, so like a 10, a 20, a 30. Then you stop, and you take a 2-week tour to Statistics Land. And then when you get done with your 2-week tour in Statistics Land, you come back to what you did before. Even though our textbooks don't do it that way, even though the teachers get partway through it and the kids really sort of start to get it when they're looking at 10 times some big number, and then all of a sudden they have to go to Statistics Land and they come back, and so you have to spend like 3 days getting them back to where they were 2 weeks before. And it also means that with this somewhat more rigid schedule that you have to follow, if, say, in the last test, which is something that just happened in my son's Algebra 1 class, and his teacher that he has this year is probably one of the best math teachers I've ever seen in my entire life. She is just beyond amazing. But these kids, their first test, it was the first test on slope-intercept, which is the first time they really get into an algebraic concept, and it blew them all away. The average score was a 68. She had one day that she could go back and review that material, and then she had to go on to the next unit because she had to keep up. Well, I'm sorry, but slope intercept is really kind of important. And that first time when you really look at that and start looking at that function, that's a big deal. I would rather she have taken 2 weeks to go back and look at that, even if that meant that she was off her schedule. But to meet the schedule, she's got to meet the SOL test, she's got to do the benchmark test, she's got to do this before this. So all of a sudden, she didn't have the time to go back and look at the material they didn't get. Now, thankfully, she sent us home everything and said, parents, make sure they do this, and this, so we could do it at home. But that pacing guide, that really rigid pacing guide, and it's not today you do this and tomorrow you do that. It's sort of, maybe this week you do this, but you got to get this done before this test is on this day. It means that a lot of times the things that our kids aren't getting, our teachers don't have the time to go back and review. And it means that a lot of times when the kids really get it really fast, well, the unit is 2 weeks long, so you're going to spend 2 weeks going over something that everybody gets. And we need to give that, I feel like we need to just take all of that and throw it out the window. Maybe have it out there as a general guideline if you want to follow it. But our teachers, you guys know what you're doing. Let you guys teach. Let's get everybody out of your classroom, let you teach what needs to be taught and the way that needs to be taught, and do your assessments the way that you think they need to be done, and we all sit back and say, thank you very much. That's what I'd really like to see.
No industry does that. No industry allows people working for them to just do what they need to do and not look in and see whether or not it's working. And I do not know of any. There may be some schools in Prince William where they're so rigid that teachers have to cover this by this period but it's really based on where your kids are. It should be. I'm concerned if this is happening throughout the county, but I've been here a long time, and I've worked in probably 20 schools or so, and I know there are people who are very rigid and say, you must teach this. You teach, and you make sure children learn. Sometimes when I taught, and if you taught, I used to have these lesson plans that I thought would take a week, and it took a day. And then I had a lesson plan that I thought was going to take a day.
It took a week.
And it took a week. You do what my husband's in the military. You respond to what you see on the ground. That's the bottom line. And so I don't want to generalize. I'm just concerned that we're generalizing about a bunch of teachers, and we're saying things that that may have happened in an individual situation. But I assure you, Prince William County Schools, we have a great school system. We have great teachers. I don't know a bunch of people who are going, got to go, And if that's happening, I want to know, and I know Betty wants to know, and I know you want to know, because that's not who we are.
Got a question over here.
Hi, sorry. My name's Brenda Wolf. I'm in Brentsville District, and I have 3 kids. 2 of them are in elementary school, 5th grade and 2nd grade. First of all, I think we have amazing teachers all through my children's elementary school. They've been responsive. They've helped when my kids needed extra help. So I just think they're amazing. I'm one of those nosy parents. I like to email if I see something going on grade-wise, see where I can help out at home. I think that's important. The teachers can only do so much. Parents need to be involved at home and back up that education. But my question is, with the SOLs, we have a big build-up to these tests. The kids know about it. My kids get stressed about it. There's a lot of stress. How do you, and this is probably best for Ms. Jesse and Ms. Gruber, how do you feel about the Common Core? Will it change that stress? Will there be as much, concentration on you got to pass this? How in your mind, how is that going to change things?
I'll jump in first. I think I don't think it'll change anything. I think it'll change what we're measuring. I think the whether, for example, like the state of Alaska hasn't adopted Common Core, but the city of Anchorage has. I mean, Alaska's a different system. I was just at a national conference, and we were colleagues. We're all talking about that. I think as long as we have pressure that everything has to be easily quantified in a qualitative profession, you're always going to have that pressure of these tests, especially if they're going to be used to label schools and to be, a major part in teacher evaluation. I mean, as long as I've been evaluated, how my children were doing was always part of that evaluation. But now that you have to reduce it to data, you have to quantify it. It's got to be this percentage of some type of evaluation system. You're always going to have that problem.
I'm sorry, just a statement to that. I went to school in Texas. I remember enjoying every minute of school, loving it. I don't ever remember the pressure that my fourth, fifth grader is in over these tests. I just want her to enjoy school and have wonderful memories of school. So that's right. Was the reasoning of my question.
Well, I could say, I
so
don't
young in these tests. It's
as long as, again, what we're doing, because I've taught long enough that I taught a lot before the SOLs came in. And again, the problem was not there's still some problem with the SOLs from my aspect of them being too broad and not deep enough. But as soon as we went into that testing phase, that you had to test them on a high school level, they had to have verified credit to graduate. Even if they were doing outstanding work in my classroom, if they froze on a test or whatever, that was it. They had to keep retaking that test till they passed. But as long as we still believe that the best way to evaluate our schools and our children is to reduce it down to taking not just one, but several high pressure, oh my gosh, the whole world depends on this test. That's unfortunately what we're doing to our children, and that's what we as educators believe is definitely wrong, because it shouldn't be that way.
I believe that, for me, everything is about balance. And we can all sit in this room and talk about how terrible tests are. At the end of the day, you're going to be tested. And that should start at school. How you test is different. What's happening with the more performance-based assessments, if you look at those science questions that I passed out, NAEP, the NAEP, who does the assessment, they went back to look at school systems that did well on the science tests. And this is what they found in common with those schools. The schools where kids did well on science tests were schools where kids were engaged in experiments, design, making products. And so when we say a test doesn't have to be paper pencil. What we're moving to, high-performing schools generally have more performance-based assessments. Instead of grading, they use rubrics. Students are involved in self-reflections and in self-assessments. I think, aren't you a writer? Didn't you come to me at the school board and say you're a writer? When you look at creative writing, being able to defend your answer. When my kids took SOL testing at Vaughan, we had this thing about justify your answer. So they had fun with it. They said it's A because. It's B, it's not B because. Because we wanted to know what the thinking is. The research on higher level thinking is 50 years old. But when teachers look at a test and they feel they've got to have a piece of paper, that's the difference. So we have to assess, but we have to change how we assess. When you look at engineering and what they have to do, that's what they're saying to us. They know how to take a paper pencil test. What we need to look at is moving more towards a more performance-based assessment and evidence not just being a paper pencil. And I'll tell you that one of my friends down in Stafford said her grandkid came home, a kindergartner, and she said, "Oh, I see where you passed that test today." And he said, "Yeah, Grandma, I passed that test, but they just keep coming."
I'd like to attempt to bring this to a close and thank our panelists. And it's, listening to the questions and the answers, I used to think, and I think I still do, that there's kind of a pecking order. And working at a community college as open admissions institutions, you know, we say we take all comers, regardless of their level of preparedness, and work with them. And then we look to the universities, and they have admission standards. And so they take just the good students. But to hear the discussion here and try to understand what happens at the public school level, the public schools indeed take all comers, whether they want to be there or not, and have to work with them and get them to a level ready for those who want to continue on to be successful at higher education. You know, we may be open door institutions, but all of the students who come to us want to come to us. But at the public school, they have to come. So it's quite a challenge, and I just, my hats are off to the teachers at the public school level, the administrators, and the school board members, and thank you all for being here this evening, our panelists, and also thank you all for being here for your interest, and the bottom line is what we're here about education. Whatever standard we have or we end up with, it's really about economic development, because our young people and our students really support the pipeline that supports the economy that we enjoy in Northern Virginia. Thank you.